Hey there, today we look at 6 real crocodile attacks, each one harder to explain than the last. From a researcher in the Okavango Delta who stepped into knee-deep water to recover a crashed drone, not seeing what was waiting in the deeper channel behind him, to a 12-year-old boy named Tyler Marsh who spent a hot school holiday afternoon at a Kakadu waterhole, passed warning signs, and never made it home. But first, we start in the Northern Territory of Australia, where 2 young British backpackers, paid for a boat trip to a remote waterfall, were told not to enter the water and still went anyway. March 28, 2017. Northern Territory, Australia. Deep in the wet season, the air was heavy, the sky low, and the river slow and thick. 2 young women arrived by boat at a remote stretch of water chasing a hidden waterfall. They were warned not to enter. They went in anyway. Only one came back out. Chloe Hernandez was 21 years old. Her companion, Isabella Russo, known to everyone as Bella, was 22. Both had come from the United Kingdom on working holiday visas, backpacking across Australia with no interest in guided tours or marked routes. They wanted the places that required effort to reach, the spots that did not appear in travel guides. That instinct had served them well across months of traveling. On this afternoon, it placed them somewhere they had no business being. The 2 had paid a local man with a small private boat to take them upriver to a remote waterfall site. This was not a licensed commercial tour. It was an informal arrangement made through local contacts, the kind of private access that backpackers in remote areas sometimes piece together when they push past the official options. The man who took them knew that stretch of river. He knew what lived in it. Before they disembarked at the landing point, he told them clearly not to go in the water. Warning signs posted at the bank said the same thing. Crocodiles were present in that system. The instruction was direct. He then stayed with the boat while the 2 women made their way toward the waterfall alone. Nobody was with them when they reached the water. 2 young women were left unsupervised at the edge of an active crocodile system with nothing between them and the water except a sign and a casual warning. To me, that's the detail that stands out the most. That gap between the instruction and any actual oversight may not seem significant at first, but it created the exact conditions that made everything that followed possible. They waded waist deep near a rock wall at the base of the falls. The water was murky, away from the rock face, calm on the surface, giving no visible indication of what was beneath it. Saltwater crocodiles are the largest living reptiles on Earth. They are ambush predators that typically hold position below the surface for extended periods, responding to movement and vibration patterns generated by activity in the water. When the conditions are met, the attack is a single upward burst covering several feet in a fraction of a second. There is no visible signal from the surface before impact. The crocodile in that river was approximately 13 to 14 feet long. He had been in that system long before any visitor arrived. When Chloe moved into his range, there was no hesitation. The animal launched from below and drove its jaws into Chloe's waist in a single lunge. It rolled immediately. The spinning motion that tears tissue, breaks the body's ability to resist, and pulls the target below the surface before the person can process what is happening. Chloe was underwater within seconds. Bella was only feet away and could do nothing. The speed of the attack gave her no window to respond. Bella got clear of the water and raised the alarm as fast as she could move. A search was launched. Chloe's body was recovered downstream the following day. The location approximate given the current conditions and the distance the river had moved her overnight. The injuries were consistent with a large crocodile attack and drowning. The animal was not removed. Wildlife authorities documented it as acting within its natural behavior, because it was. Rangers incorporated it directly into warnings issued to visitors approaching waterways in crocodile country. 2 women spent months traveling Australia and ignoring warnings without consequence. I've always thought that's how risk becomes invisible. Every time you push past a warning and walk away unharmed, the next warning feels easier to dismiss. In crocodile country, that mindset can be fatal. And near a remote waterfall in the Northern Territory, it was. But while this happened at an unsupervised riverbank with no structure around it, the next story took place inside a research setting with trained personnel and proper equipment nearby. A doctoral researcher in the Okavango Delta still made one distracted decision that the Delta made absolutely permanent. October 17th, 2017. The Okavango Delta in Botswana was quiet that afternoon. Still water, dry air, shallow inlets that looked completely harmless from the bank. It is the kind of place that appears peaceful right up until the moment it is not. Daniel Park had spent weeks working in this delta and believed he had a solid read on it. By the end of that day, the delta had made sure he would never get another chance to revise that read. The delta is one of the planet's most unique ecosystems, a vast inland waterway threaded with deep channels where large animals have lived undisturbed for generations. For Daniel, it was a research site. For the crocodile patrolling the nearby channel, it was home. That difference mattered. Daniel was 27 years old, a doctoral candidate from South Korea studying bird nesting patterns and water quality across remote sections of the delta. He had been in the field for several weeks, using drones to photograph bird colonies and map vegetation in areas too hard to reach on foot. He had a field assistant alongside him and had completed basic safety training before starting. His expertise was birds and aquatic vegetation. Crocodiles were a known risk in his environment. They were just not what he was focused on. And that, right there, is the thing I keep coming back to. You do not have to ignore a danger to end up inside it. You just have to stop thinking about it for 60 seconds. On the afternoon of October 17th, a gust of wind pushed Daniel's drone into a branch, sending it into the water near the bank. The drone carried weeks of valuable research data. Recovering it felt urgent. That urgency would soon become a dangerous mistake. I completely understood Daniel at that point. Anyone who has worked hard for something and sees it slipping away right in front of their eyes will want to save it. But in his situation, trying to save it ended up costing him his life. Daniel waded into knee-deep water to retrieve the drone, focused on it near the bank with his back turned to the deeper channel beyond the inlet. Nile crocodiles are one of the most dangerous animals in Africa. A mature male can reach 14 feet in length and weigh over 500 pounds. They are built entirely on patience. They can remain completely submerged and motionless for long periods while reading everything happening around them. They do not need deep water to attack. They need proximity and opportunity. Daniel had just handed them both, and he had no idea the crocodile was an estimated 14 feet long, a large territorial male that had been using that section of the delta as his home range for years. He was positioned in the deeper channel just off the inlet's edge, fully submerged and completely still. Daniel never heard him move. At that size, in water, a Nile crocodile generates almost no surface disturbance before a strike. The animal came from the deeper channel and struck from behind. Its jaws closed around Daniel's torso. The field assistant on the bank saw the entire thing unfold in real time and had no window to shout a warning before impact. He immediately began throwing rocks and moving along the bank, trying to get close enough to do something useful. The crocodile did not respond to any of it. The crocodile performed a death roll, the powerful spinning motion that tears internal tissue, breaks bone, and pulls the target below the surface all at once. A search was launched that same evening and ran through the night, with teams covering the downstream waterways in difficult low visibility conditions. Daniel's body was recovered the following morning, more than 2 miles from the attack site, carried through the channel system overnight. The official cause of death was documented as rapid blood loss combined with traumatic asphyxiation. The bite had caused severe internal injuries to his torso, and the compression from the death roll had damaged his chest cavity enough that breathing would have been impossible even before the drowning process fully took hold. I have thought about that field assistant more than once. He stood on that bank and watched it happen directly in front of him. He threw everything he had at that animal, and it changed nothing. There was nothing else he could have done. That is not something a person moves past easily. His case became widely cited in field research safety programs across Southern Africa, used specifically to address the danger of equipment recovery in wild waterways without first clearing and assessing the surrounding area. But as remote and isolated as that delta was, the next story happened behind walls, inside a working facility with staff and structures and people moving through daily routines every single day. And somehow, that made no difference at all. I think that's what makes this story so unsettling. Nothing about the scene hinted at what was coming next. A small private pearl farming facility sat close to the water's edge, wrapped in heavy tropical air. The wind was warm and damp, carrying salt from the sea, while the water moved slowly against the shore. I find it striking how ordinary everything looked, right up until the moment everything changed. Workers had already started their usual routines, not knowing this day would not stay ordinary for long. Daisy was 44 years old and one of the most respected people working at the farm. She was a marine biologist. Her role focused on monitoring the health of the oyster beds and overseeing the quality of the pearls being produced at the facility. She was organized, thorough, and well regarded by her colleagues. Looking at her background, nothing about Daisy suggests carelessness or poor judgment. What her story reflects is something more insidious than either of those things. It reflects what happens when a genuinely dangerous situation is allowed to become routine. For over a year, the Japanese owner of the pearl farm had been keeping a large saltwater crocodile in a concrete pond on the property. The animal had been acquired illegally and was kept as something the owner treated as an exotic pet. The staff had named him Mary. He measured 14.5 feet in length and weighed over 1,300 pounds. Mary was not a pet by any meaningful definition of the word. He was a wild, apex predator confined in a concrete enclosure, and Daisy and her colleagues were expected to feed him as a regular part of their working day. There was no feeding hatch, no extended tool, no barrier between the person and the water. The enclosure was a basic concrete pond. You walked up to the edge, you threw the food in, and you stood close enough for the animal to see exactly where it came from. That was the entire system. That was all there was. Over months, that feeding schedule had been absorbed into the ordinary rhythm of the facility. Workers knew the timing. The task had been repeated so many times without incident that it had stopped feeling like its extraordinarily dangerous activity it always was. I find this to be a predictable pattern in human behavior. With enough repetition and no consequences, the brain starts to downgrade the risk. But in this case, the risk had a 14-foot saltwater crocodile at the end of it. On the morning of January 16th, co-workers arrived to find Daisy missing. They searched the property and found her body inside Mary's enclosure. Saltwater crocodiles respond to movement and vibration near the surface of the water with explosive, reflexive speed. A person crouching or leaning at the edge of a pond to deposit food creates precisely the kind of surface disturbance that triggers a strike response in the animal. When a crocodile has been fed by a human standing at the water's edge on a consistent schedule for over a year, it begins to associate the proximity of a person with the imminent arrival of food. That is not domestication. It is behavioral conditioning that points directly toward an attack. Investigators concluded that Daisy most likely slipped or lost her balance near the edge of the enclosure during the feeding process. In the fraction of a second that she either entered the water or came within Mary's striking range, the animal responded the way a saltwater crocodile is built to respond. The injuries told the full story: massive crush trauma from the initial bite, internal damage from the death row, and drowning, none of which left any window for survival. A large rescue team with many people was sent to sedate Mary and remove him from the enclosure. It was not easy. A crocodile that big does not calm down quickly, even with sedation. In the end, Mary was moved to a regional animal conservation facility. In the days after the incident, the farm's owner could not be reached by the police. Daisy's family was left to deal with an outcome that should never have been allowed. The case drew wide attention in Indonesia and raised serious questions about exotic animal ownership laws and safety rules. It became a clear example of what can go wrong when a wild animal is kept in a working place without proper protection. I don't see this as a careless professional decision on her part. She was placed inside an illegal, dangerous situation that had been allowed to continue for over a year. Eventually, the predictable outcome arrived. That failure belongs to the system, not to her. But while this story unfolded behind walls in a facility with people and structures nearby, the next one happened in open coastal water. A retired man, a calm afternoon, and a small boat near a creek mouth in far north Queensland. A situation that looked completely unremarkable until it stopped being unremarkable entirely. February 11th, 2021. Far north Queensland. The water was flat, the wind almost gone, an afternoon that felt safe enough to relax in. Jeff Thornton told his wife he would be back within the hour. He stepped into his small dinghy and headed toward a nearby coastal island he had fished before. He never returned. Jeffrey Thornton was 69 and lived aboard a yacht with his wife along the far north Queensland coast. Over the years, they had built a quiet life on the water. Jeff knew these waters well. He understood tides, weather, and the small signs most people miss. Years of experience had made him careful, confident, and rarely wrong. That Thursday afternoon, he headed out alone in his small 8-foot dinghy for what should have been a short, routine fishing trip near a nearby island. The water was calm, the conditions were perfect, nothing about it suggested he wouldn't come back. I think experience on the water matters, and I am not going to dismiss it. But it can also create a quiet confidence in environments that do not get safer with time. The space between human experience and predator response is invisible. And that is where this story unfolds. At some point during that trip, investigators believe Jeff moved his dinghy into water near a tidal creek mouth, a stretch of coastline that wildlife authorities had consistently flagged as active crocodile territory. What happened in those specific minutes has never been fully reconstructed. There were no witnesses and no recording of any kind, but the physical evidence told a partial story. Saltwater crocodiles are known to actively patrol tidal creek mouths and shallow coastal stretches where fish gather near the surface. A mature male can reach 15 feet in length and weigh over 1,000 pounds. A small vessel, sitting low in the water, close to the bank, with a single occupant moving and shifting weight while casting a line, registers as surface activity inside territory. A large resident crocodile treats as its own. Whether the animal struck the hull directly, lunged at Jeff as he leaned over the side, or hit the boat as it drifted too close to the bank, the outcome was the same. At some point, Goff entered the water. He did not come back out. When he failed to return by evening and did not respond to radio calls, his wife contacted authorities. A search launched that night found his 8-foot dinghy capsized near the mouth of a tidal creek. The hull showed damage that investigators assessed as consistent with a large animal strike. Wildlife authorities described crocodile involvement as highly likely based on the damage pattern and the confirmed presence of large crocodiles in the immediate area. They stopped short of calling it certain. That language was deliberate. A capsized dinghy near a creek mouth does not automatically tell one story. Honest investigators do not eliminate other possibilities without clear reason. What the evidence offered was a pattern pointing strongly in one direction, and they called it what it most likely was. I think the uncomfortable truth is that no one will ever know exactly what happened on that water. That gap stays open, and with time, it gets replaced by a version of events people can live with rather than what is necessarily true. A large saltwater crocodile was located in the waterway near the search area and euthanized. Biological material recovered during examination was assessed as consistent with human remains, and findings were attributed to Jeff. The investigation concluded he had most likely been taken from the vessel. No exact sequence could be confirmed. His death was recorded in Queensland's official crocodile-related fatality records and used in renewed safety campaigns targeting solo boating near tidal creek systems with an established crocodile presence. Every safety campaign is written for someone who does not yet know the risk. Jeff knew those waters. He had fished in them and returned from them. A warning sign reads very differently to a man who has passed it dozens of times without incident. That repetition does not make a person reckless. It just makes them human. But while Jeff most likely never saw what was coming, the next story is the complete opposite. The next man saw the crocodile clearly, in broad daylight, with people standing next to him telling him to walk away. He grabbed it by the tail with his bare hands. Early April 2022, Namibia, dry air and open sky over a waterhole in the Kavango region, not far from the Okavango River. The kind of location where large wildlife moves through with little separation from the people who live nearby. The Nile crocodile resting near the water's edge that afternoon was not unusual for this part of the country. The man who decided to walk up to it was Simpson Paulus, was 41 years old and worked as a border security guard in the region. He was at the waterhole that afternoon with a group of people. According to every eyewitness account gathered after the incident, Simpson had been warned more than once by the people around him to leave the crocodile alone. The warnings were clear, they were repeated. He ignored all of them. Simpson was not unfamiliar with outdoor environments. His job placed him regularly in open terrain near remote border areas, and he had spent years working where large wildlife was a routine presence. He was physically capable and experienced in demanding conditions. What he appears to have miscalculated entirely was the animal directly in front of him. He approached the 10-foot Nile crocodile resting near the waterhole's edge and came within arm's reach of it. He made contact with the animal. The crocodile did not immediately move. And this is where Simpson made the most dangerous mistake of his life, reading that stillness as tolerance. He appeared to believe the animal was slow or unresponsive, possibly assuming the heat had made it docile. Also, he wanted to demonstrate to the group that the crocodile was not the threat everyone around him believed it to be. I find it clear from the behavior that he had reached a conclusion without evidence that he understood the animal better than the people warning him. Nile crocodiles are responsible for hundreds of human deaths across the African continent each year. A mature male can reach 16 feet in length and weigh well over 1,000 pounds. When a crocodile remains motionless near a perceived threat, it is not necessarily calm. It may be assessing, conserving energy, or positioning itself for a rapid defensive or predatory response with little visible warning. The stillness and the explosion of movement are separated by nothing the human eye can track in real time. The animal reacted with a speed that no one nearby had time to process. It spun and drove its jaws into Simpson's left arm. The bite force of a Nile crocodile is among the strongest in the animal kingdom, capable of exerting several thousand pounds of pressure in a single strike. The wound was severe, with significant tissue damage and bone injury. Bystanders scattered immediately, screaming and moving away from the water in every direction. Then, for reasons no one at the scene could immediately explain, the crocodile released him and remained near the water's edge. Simpson was transported first to a local medical facility in the Kavango region before being transferred to a hospital where emergency treatment was attempted. The injuries were extensive and critical. Despite intervention, he succumbed to his wounds shortly after arrival. The cause of death was determined to be catastrophic traumatic injuries, including severe tissue damage and massive blood loss. Surviving, in this case, was never a realistic outcome once the animal made full contact. The only reason the situation did not end at the water's edge was the brief release by the crocodile. By the time he reached medical care, the damage had already reached a point beyond recovery. The attack was filmed on mobile phones by bystanders, and the footage spread across social media. Due to the graphic nature of the injuries shown and in accordance with local broadcasting guidelines, the footage was not officially distributed through any public media channel. Namibian wildlife authorities reviewed it as part of the formal incident documentation. I don't see this as a story about an unexpected encounter. Everyone at the water hole could see exactly what was there. Simpson received multiple direct warnings from people standing beside him, and I think he found out exactly what happens when those warnings stop meaning anything to you. The only variable that afternoon was the decision Simpson made to keep walking forward. And while Simpson walked away from that water hole, barely, the next story involves someone who never had that chance. A 12-year-old boy, a summer afternoon in Kakadu, and a waterhole the entire community already knew was not safe to swim in. January 26, 2014 came during one of the most intense stretches of the wet season in Northern Territory, Australia. The heat did not break that day. It stayed heavy over Mujimberia, under a sky that looked permanently closed. Inside Kakadu National Park, a group of 5 boys decided to spend the last days of the school holidays at a waterhole they had been to before. One of them was 12-year-old Tyler Marsh. He would not come home that afternoon. The waterhole near Mujimberia sat inside one of the most crocodile-dense regions in Australia. Kakadu National Park carries a long and documented history of crocodile incidents, and the wet season is consistently when that history grows. The boys were not strangers to the area. This was not a place they had discovered by accident. It was a known spot, a place other people in the community had used before. I think the key detail here is that the Mujimberia community knew what lived in those waterways. This wasn't unfamiliar ground or outsider behavior. These were local children at a known spot used by adults in the same area. That makes the lack of supervision harder to justify. There was no adults with those boys. 5 children, one of them 12 years old, walked to a waterhole inside Kakadu during the wet season with nobody responsible for them present. The warning signs were there, but a sign is not a fence, and a sign is not a supervisor. Without either, it is just decoration at the edge of the water. Wet season floods connect waterways across Kakadu, letting saltwater crocodiles move into areas they usually cannot reach in the dry season. Places that are separate most of the year become linked, and large animals spread into new waterholes. The water also becomes very murky, making it almost impossible to see below the surface. January is one of the most dangerous months for entering water in Kakadu, and warnings are clear. The boys went in anyway. A saltwater crocodile had been using that waterhole during the wet season expansion of the local system. Saltwater crocodiles are ambush predators and typically remain still or only minimally active when positioned for a hunt. One of the older boys, named Ethan, was struck first. The crocodile launched from a submerged position in a vertical upward lunge, the classic attack posture of a saltwater crocodile hunting in shallow water. The boy was bitten on the arm and managed to pull free in the immediate chaos. Any resistance in that water creates additional disturbance and keeps the animal engaged in the area. The water was already churning with panic and movement. The crocodile reoriented. It found Tyler next. The jaws closed around him with immense force, strong enough to crush bone and overpower resistance instantly. The death roll followed almost immediately. The explosive spinning motion used to disorient prey and tear at resistance while dragging it deeper. Tyler was pulled from the shallow section into the deeper water. The other boys got out of the water. There was nothing they could have done from that point. I can't overlook the fact that the boys who got out of the water watched it happen. They were children, and they ran because there was no other option. That afternoon didn't end at the bank. It went home with them. Police launched an immediate search of the waterhole and surrounding waterways. Investigators stated that evidence at the scene strongly indicated Tyler had been killed. Wildlife authorities launched a targeted removal operation focusing on crocodiles in the immediate area. Several crocodiles were located in targeted follow-up operations. and some were removed from the immediate area as a precaution. One large crocodile in the area, measuring around 15 feet, was captured during follow-up operations, though it could not be confirmed as the specific animal involved. Schools in the region incorporated the case into water safety education. Rangers increased patrols around known recreational waterways and installed additional signage at multiple access points inside the park. 5 boys walked to a water hole inside Kakadu in January with no adult present during the most dangerous season of the year in one of the most documented crocodile regions in the country. It is a reminder of how quickly risk escalates in crocodile country, especially when children enter the water without supervision during the wet season.